Well, today we have a very special guest, former First Lady of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have with us Susan Allan, and she's authored a book I think that you're going to want to get for your home. And we are excited to talk about it, The Remarkable Ronald Reagan, Cowboy and Commander-in-Chief. And Susan, thank you so much for letting us have some of your time and for authoring the book. What inspired you to do this?
Thank you so much, Perry. Well, gosh, what an exciting time to be able to talk about Ronald Reagan and to make sure that elementary age children understand his life and his legacy. I think it's more important today than ever before. We live in a time when young people communicate with tweets and snaps and little quick sound bites on their electronic devices. Ronald Reagan was the great communicator, and he became so by being an avid reader and by working very hard to make sure that he could convey his message to others, to unite them behind him when he ran for office. So his life story is really a compelling story, but you can learn so many lessons about so many other things.
All right, now this is a children's book, and it's illustrated by Leslie Harrington, and we have a picture up on the screen there, so it is written for children, and it's available in the bookstores now, Susan?
It is on Amazon.com or in bookstores, but I do hope people will find The Remarkable Ronald Reagan to put in their home library or donate it to a school or public library.
Yeah, you bet. Well, listen, tell us about your own personal relationship with Ronald Reagan.
Well, he was a friend of the Allan family that I married into, actually. My late father-in-law was an NFL coach with the LA Rams when Ronald Reagan was governor, and Reagan would show up at practices. And that really impressed the Allan family, that he didn't come just to sit in the games, in the box, but he would actually come and watch practice. So around that time, in '76, my husband, George Allan, was graduating from school in Virginia, and Ronald Reagan called him and asked him to run Young Virginians for Reagan. My husband had never been involved in organized politics, but was so inspired by Reagan as governor of California, watching what he did, how he kept his promises, and what he did to inspire other people. So my husband helped him in '76, and then my husband's career took off after that as well.
Well, he did, and he went on to become governor of the Commonwealth, and that's just wonderful. Well, listen, of all the people you have selected Ronald Reagan, he is very unique in so many ways. What are you trying to have young people get from this man's life?
I love his all-American story. He started out with very humble beginnings. In Illinois, his mother would help other people who were living in very difficult times. She would bring guests to their home, feed them, let them stay overnight. And I think Ronald Reagan really learned compassion as a young boy, following his mother's footsteps and watching what she did to help take care of others. He had a lot of dreams, though. He went on to be a lifeguard, a radio announcer, an actor. He was in 53 films. And as he worked very hard at all of these other dreams, one thing led to another, and people asked him to run for governor in California. He did such a good job there that, of course, there came this call for him to run for president of the United States. So his life story is really an incredible story. And what we did with the book was we had the children's version of his life story. We point out a lot of important things that happened during his time as president, including telling Gorbachev to tear down the wall, the blow-up of the Challenger, the attempted assassination. But in the back of this book, we also put in facts and figures, highlights, quotes, and copies of letters that he wrote to children. He was a prolific writer. So I think the book is excellent for adults to read so they can remember why Ronald Reagan was so well loved, and they can share their own stories with children. Children will enjoy this book because it's a great book report book. There's a great story there, and then all the facts in the back make it a good resource book. No question about it. I've really enjoyed thumbing through it quickly. You know, what's interesting is it's proof that something good can come out of Hollywood. Absolutely.
And secondly is that he was obviously known as the great communicator. I want you to comment on that. And yet he had a eyesight problem in reading, and so, but he was able to communicate with such passion. It was a unique gift. He was an avid reader, as many people were in his day, but they say even on a movie set, he could be found backstage reading books. And that's really the start to great communication, is being a great reader. So I encourage young people to read as much as possible. Using their electronic devices is great. It's all well and good. You can get a lot of information there, but there's nothing like reading a book. And Ronald Reagan went on to give wonderful speeches, and he saw that he could motivate people.
And so when he had ideas about lifting America up, about making sure that we all had pride in America again, he was able to unite the country with those thoughts and impressions by being an optimist. Another great quality to have as a human being, no matter what your purpose or calling in life is, to be optimistic about it every single day. Ronald Reagan led by example, and I think he was really one of the greatest leaders of our country, not just helping people here in America, but in fact people around the world. You can still talk to people today who say Ronald Reagan deserves all the credit for being their voice while they were held behind the Iron Curtain or in oppressed lands elsewhere. So Ronald Reagan did in fact change the world.
No question about it. How did his faith play into his leadership role?
Faith was an important part of Ronald Reagan's life. His mother made sure that he and his brother went to church with her every Sunday. Again, she was a very compassionate person and lived out her faith by taking in others who were less fortunate. Ronald Reagan often would write scripture in the margins of his speeches. He would sometimes quote scripture. He didn't have any fear in mentioning God or his faith. And in fact, when the Challenger exploded and he gave this wonderful talk on television that evening to the American people to try to calm them and say, we can't really understand how this could happen, why it would happen, but we know that these astronauts have now touched the face of God. It was his way of comforting the nation at a very difficult time. After the attempted assassination, he also felt a renewed surgence in what he needed to do with his life. He felt like God had spared him and that he needed to get out there and work double time to make things happen so that America would be strong and would be seen as, from everybody else around the world, as the greatest nation on earth.
You know, he actually really put meaning behind the phrase, the art of compromise, because he was able to use that to advance his agenda.
He was, and the other thing I think very important about a great leader is that they can put their differences aside with a fellow human being and still remain friends. I think it's interesting that 26 years ago, he went over and told Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down this wall. Something very brave and something very brazen, and we have a picture of that in the book. And yet, later on, he invited Gorbachev to come and visit him at his ranch. It was another dream come true in Reagan's life. After 8 years in the governor's mansion in California, he bought a ranch where he could ride horses every day. And he invited family and friends there. He invited Gorby there. And I think that was very telling of the type of man that he was. While he did not agree with communism and what it did to people, he did find that being warm and open with Gorby probably helped the relation between the U.S. and Russia. And so I think there's a tall man behind somebody who can do that. It's a very, very good quality to have.
So of all the things when you did the research for the book, what are some of the facts that moved you the most?
Well, Reagan's story as a young man is very interesting. We don't always know a lot about how people are raised and the influences in their life. I think it's funny that Reagan was a lifeguard. He was very athletic, not necessarily a star athlete, but he did try everything. He was a good swimmer, and he saved 77 lives in the Rock River. And we know that because he kept notches on a stick so that he could record each time he pulled somebody out of the river.
Wow.
He was nervous about being an actor. He really didn't want to show everybody, hey, this is my mission, this is my dream, because he was afraid he'd be laughed at. But a friend gave him confidence when he was out in California. He went and tried out, and 53 films later, and helping during World War II, making training films, Reagan really was a movie star.
No question about that. Wow. Well, this is a fascinating book. It's called The Remarkable Ronald Reagan, Cowboy and Commander-in-Chief. Illustrations by Leslie Harrington, of course, authored by Susan Allan. And let me encourage you to check it out and get a copy of it. And as Susan has said, you know, get it, put it in your home library or put it in the school library. There's so much to be learned from it. And, you know, one of my bucket list things, I guess you could say, is I still want to go down. I haven't been to his library yet, but I want to go visit. Have you been there?
Yes, it is interesting. And of course, Young America's Foundation operates the Reagan Ranch. Mrs. Reagan agreed to sell it to Young America's Foundation because they are really in charge of carrying on Ronald Reagan's legacy, teaching young people. They have seminars for high school and college age children, but really nothing was being done for the elementary age group. And so Young America's Foundation has also partnered with this book. And they can take you to the ranch for a private tour. They have a Reagan Center in Santa Barbara where they have many artifacts from Ronald Reagan from the ranch. And that's another fascinating place to go.
All right. And lastly, Susan, he seemed to have an extra measure of perseverance. I don't know where that came from, maybe from his mother, but he just kept moving forward all the time and doing good things.
It's true. You know, he ran for president in 1976 and failed, and came back and did beautifully when he ran in 1980, won the nomination, and went on to serve 2 terms as president. It takes a special person to be able to persevere through that. It's not easy to campaign. It's certainly not easy to run for president of the United States. But when I met Ronald Reagan in 1987, I loved the fact that he could put everybody at ease. He was so kind, such a gentleman, but he had this great, strong compass internally. And I think that guided him well throughout his life. And he really was a remarkable man.
Well, thank you for your time, Susan, and thank you for what you're doing. I don't know if you're going to do a sequel to this or do an adult book about Ronald Reagan, but I think it's wonderful that you have done this and illustrated it the way you have for young people, because it is a legacy that needs to live on.
That's true, and thank you so much. And I hope all of our listeners will check out The Remarkable Ronald Reagan.